Hey everyone, Felix here, and welcome back to InventBox, where the solution is right around the corner. In this tutorial, I want to look at something called forms. Forms are kind of like, just like if you were filling out an informational form, like some paperwork or something, and people are collecting information about you, you can build forms on a web page. So if we look at the HTML reference, there's a section here called Forms and Input. We can see that there's a form tag, and that is going to be a container for all of the form information. I went ahead and created a t-shirt.html page. So here's t-shirt.html, and I made a link. So if we head over there, you can see I have the beginnings of a t-shirt ordering page. However, there's a whole bunch of random fields on here. Basically, what I just did here is I took a sampling of some of the more unique form inputs that HTML has built in. So if we look at this code, we can see that I have a select tag, which is over here. And if you aren't sure how to use it, you can click on this and it'll show you exactly how. So I have something of this same nature here, select tag, and then there are option tags in the middle. And so inside here, I have an option tag with the text, the actual visible text, small, medium, large, and extra large, and then a value of the abbreviated version that might get passed into my database where I can keep track of what the user actually selected. But what goes inside option here, this text, is what visibly shows up on the page. And so you can see in this little drop-down menu, now we have small, medium, large, and extra large. So that's the select. Then text area is also pretty common. It is a big area where you're allowed to just type lots and lots of text. And oftentimes they even have this little area that lets you drag it to as big as a box as you want. We also have buttons. And now we start to get into a single tag, actually, called an input tag. This last one was select. This was a text area. And all of the rest are just input tags. See, every single one of these is an input tag. But they have different type attributes. And we can look at all of these attributes here. If we back up and click on input, it'll show us here's a bunch of different attributes that you can specify, and then here's type. These are all of the types of inputs that HTML currently supports. So if we put in type button, you can see we get a button like this. Checkbox. Now with checkboxes, you have to give all of the related checkboxes the same name. So I might be selecting, for example, which features I want on my shirt. So this will let me select however many of whichever features I want in any combination. So maybe I would make this name be, features. And so these would all be, these would all be just features. The difference between checkboxes and then when you see down here, radio buttons are like checkboxes, except you can only select one. You've probably seen these before, but they're called radio buttons. Just like this, input type radio, and you give them all the same name, and that's how it knows which radio buttons to only allow one to be selected for. We also have a color input where you can click this and it actually brings up a color picker. Whoops. It brings up a color picker. We can select that color and you can see that it is now chosen. Date field is just type date and we click on it. It has this nice little calendar. Someone can select the date. If you want someone to upload a file, maybe an image for their profile picture or something, we can do input type file. And when you click that, it will open up something and you can upload a file. Number. This lets you enter a number, but it also has this little arrows with the counter next to it, which is kind of cool. A password input. When you start typing, it masks what you type in. Very useful for password fields. We talked about radio buttons. Range is kind of cool. It has this little slider that lets you move back and forth. Input type reset is basically just a button that says reset. You might use it for a special purpose. But basically it's just a button. A search box, basically just a text box. Type submit is a button, and we usually use these submit buttons at the very bottom of a form to indicate that we're done and we're submitting it. And then lastly, you have a regular text field, and so you can just type whatever in this field. And there are others. I haven't gone through every single one of these, but a lot of these are, for example, week. It's basically just a text field, but you might specifically use it to type in week, and it makes it easier to access this information from your web server when it's saving the information from the form that the user filled out. The other thing about these inputs on all of these form elements is there are a few common attributes that we can use with them. So we see with this text area that the text I put inside the text area tags is right here, this some default text, and it was auto-populated into the page. And so I can like delete this in here if I want to. Whereas down here in this text box, it has this word placeholder. And when I start typing, see that it vanishes. And if I erase everything, it comes back. That you can do with this attribute. Placeholder equals, I don't know, maybe email. And if I reload the page, see now the placeholder says email. Another common attribute we might use is max length. Might put 5, and now when I start typing in this field, I'm still hitting the keyboard, but it won't let me type any further than 5 characters. We can also make the disabled flag true, and you'll see that the field is now grayed out and the user cannot enter any information here. So those are some of the common attributes, and of course there are more, and you can look at all of the attributes that are there on the documentation, but those are just a few of the most common ones that I've seen. Another very useful thing for forms is the label tag. You'll notice that I have a little block of text that says select right next to the shirt, or like shirt text, and then here's a block for them to enter the text. So these labels are useful for indicating to your users which field is for what. And using labels is really simple. All you have to do is give the field a name. For example, I might call this size, and then label for whatever the name is. And that will automatically attach this label to this field. And of course, when you're making a form, you do need to put it into a form tag. So let's go ahead and make our actual t-shirt order form. We need the size. We need some text. We don't need the button or the checkbox, but color would be a useful thing to have on the form. And none of this other stuff is really any useful except for the submit button, which doesn't need a label. Type equals submit, and we want to put the value, and that'll be the actual text on the button. So maybe place order, and we'll get rid of that. Okay, so we have our size, our text, our shirt color, and then a place order button. And you notice that when I click place order, the page actually tries to reload. And the reason for that is by putting these things inside. Oh, I need to close the form tag. By putting these things all inside a form, when you click a input type equals submit that is inside a form, it automatically takes all the information that is saved in the form and submits it to a place that you specify. We haven't specified anything. We just left our form tag blank. And the reason for that is that using purely HTML, as we've been using, there's actually nothing you can do with the information. You need to have some sort of back-end server running some code that can access a database or email or something like that. So in another series, I will explain how to write a back-end server. But the important thing to know is that with pure HTML, you can't actually do anything with this information. It's just here for people to play around with. And lastly, one more problem with this form is that it looks like trash. Nobody would ever make their website form actually look this bad. We can solve that by using what I've been talking about, cascading style sheets, or CSS, to style up the page and make it look a whole lot nicer. So that's what the next tutorial is going to be about. You definitely want to stick around for that.